It's been a while since I made my last discussion video, mostly because I didn't really know what to make my next one about. But I've been brainstorming some ideas, and from now on, I'll include an outro for each of my videos, that way you all know what to expect down the pipeline. So, one thing that's been on my mind are video game reviewers and what sort of standard they have to hold in order for their opinions to be valid. And I know some of you guys are thinking that there isn't such a thing as an invalid opinion when it comes to video games because everyone has different tastes, but hear me out. Even though by nature opinions are completely subjective, sometimes a reviewer's points can be so skewed and biased that it doesn't feel genuine. To me, the perfect example of this was IGN's review of Sonic Unleashed for the PS3 and 360, where the guy was making vague statements about how bad the game is without actually giving reasons to back up his points. The first minute or so is completely pointless to watch because the intro is just him whining over how bad the game is. It takes him until around the 1 minute 15 second mark that he actually says something worth hearing, where he says that the daytime stages aren't perfect because the jump button can be unresponsive and it's basically the same trial and error gameplay that gets old after a while, right before he ironically jumps off a cliff into a bottomless pit instead of using the dash pad laid out right in front of him. If you've played any 3D Sonic games since Sonic Adventure, you know running on a dash pad that arches over a bottomless pit will take you to the other side. So, how is that a good example of Sonic Unleashed being trial and error? He also says that the nighttime stages suck because it goes from the speedy Sonic stages that he was previously complaining about to a bunch of boring brawling sections. He never really explained why he thought they were boring, he just expected you to go along with what he was saying without actually explaining why. He says that the fighting segments are tedious and terrible, which is another vague statement because he never actually explains why they are tedious and terrible. He also says that the platforming sections in the nighttime stages are bad without going into any details other than they take almost half an hour to complete. If each nighttime level takes almost half an hour to complete, but you were having fun, then what's the issue? You see where I'm going with all this? You may think that a game like Sonic Unleashed is bad, and you have the right to express why you think it's bad. But if someone were to come up to you and ask what made you think that, and the only reasons you can come up with are just a million different ways of saying, dude, trust me, then you aren't really expressing your opinions, you're just not thinking. One thing that you'll often hear from people in the comment sections of a game review on YouTube is that they didn't like the video because it wasn't objective enough. But that's completely ridiculous, because reviews by nature aren't supposed to be objective. Let's use both Uncharted and the Tomb Raider series as an example to explain what I mean. Uncharted is a third-person action game with a heavy emphasis on story. The gameplay is centered around platforming segments with enemies and area puzzles mixed in between. You are able to use various guns, grenades, as well as your fists to kill off enemy mobs. Tomb Raider is a third-person action game with a heavy emphasis on story. The gameplay is centered around platforming segments with enemies and area puzzles mixed in between. You are able to use various guns, an axe, as well as a bow and arrow to kill off enemy mobs. If both of those reviews sounded boring to hear, that's because they were. If I were to explain how I felt about the combat in Uncharted, whether I preferred one series over the other, what I thought of the story in Shadow of the Tomb Raider versus Rise of the Tomb Raider, or even something simple as just slapping a score on each title, that would be expressing my opinion, which would turn those reviews into being subjective. So as you can see, it's important for reviewers to find that fine line of critical thinking to where they understand why something is good or bad in a video game. But at the same time, they aren't just stating things that could be read off the back of the box. Now you may be wondering, well, what's the point of hearing the opinions of an accredited video game critic when technically all they're doing is expressing their thoughts like anyone else? Well, the point is that video game companies have to rely on these people to give good publicity and spread the word about an upcoming game that potential customers might be interested in. And while there are plenty of examples of professional reviewers and talking heads on gaming magazines who basically shill out positive reviews to help companies like Activision, if it wasn't for the existence of professional reviewers, how else would you make an informed decision on which game you want to buy? Sure, there are things like commercials on TV and billboards, but those are made by the same company that made the game. And you wouldn't just buy a product based on a sales pitch, would you? So while video game reviewers are not much different than you or I, and they vary in terms of reliability, that's definitely better than having to rely on the word of mouth from a company and have a higher risk of getting ripped off. And to wrap up this video, it's important to understand that video game reviewers do have to live up to these standards when it comes to how they express their opinions. It's not enough for them to just prattle on about the things they hate about a game and slap a score between 1 and 10 without explaining why. Even though you can make the argument that anyone can be a reviewer, it's important to have people who do this for a living so that news about an upcoming game can be revealed, allowing customers to make an informed purchase. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? Be sure to leave a comment down below and subscribe to my channel for more content.